The cemetery was unusually quiet that morning, cloaked in a dull grey mist that clung low to the ground like sorrow reluctant to leave. The breeze whispered through the dying autumn leaves, and not a bird dared sing. It was as though even nature understood this funeral wasn't just about death. It was about something unspoken, something that hadn't yet been buried. Mourners stood in a neat line, dressed in solemn blacks and military blues. The American flag, folded tightly into a triangle, rested on a wooden stool beside the coffin. A photograph leaned gently against. Ayat Sergeant Elena Rios, 34, former decorated military K-9 handler, convicted of second-degree murder, scheduled to serve a life sentence, until she was found dead in her cell 3 days ago. They said it was suicide. They always say that. Beside the polished coffin, unmoving but alert, sat a German shepherd named Echo. His fur had dulled slightly, with time, but his eyes still held the fierce intelligence of a war dog trained to track the scent of death and the truth. He had not touched his food since the day she died. Now, as the priest began his prayer, Echo shifted. First, a low whine, in his throat, then his ears perked sharply. The priest's voice faltered for a breath. Echo let out a single sharp bark that cut the silence like a blade. Heads turned. A child whimpered. One of the officers flinched. Echo's gaze had locked directly onto Captain Harold Knox, the senior officer leading the burial detail. He was the man who'd arrested Elena, the man who testified against her. Knox shifted his stance slightly, clearing his throat, his jaw tightening under the brim of his cap. He gave a short nod to the 2 junior officers flanking him, as if signaling to remain calm. But Echo's growl deepened, low and guttural, like a storm still gathering. The priest tried to continue, but the tension had already bloomed. It grew, like frost on glass, thin at first but unmistakable. Echo's hackles rose, his paws tensed as if ready to spring. "No," whispered a voice among the crowd. "He never behaved like this, not even in combat." Echo took 2 measured steps forward, still growling, his eyes never leaving Knox. Knox took an almost imperceptible step back. It was enough. A murmur spread across the mourners. Not loud, not chaotic, just unease, rolling through like the breeze. Itself had turned suspicious. Knox smiled tightly and crouched, holding a hand out like one might to a skittish dog. But his fingers trembled. "Easy, boy, settle down. You remember me, don't you?" Echo didn't move. He only snarled, lips curling just slightly, enough to reveal the gleam of his canines. The priest stopped mid-sentence again. This was no ordinary misbehavior. Echo had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, had sniffed out IEDs in schoolhouses, had dragged wounded soldiers through gunfire. He didn't misbehave unless something was wrong. A distant rumble of thunder groaned across the sky, though the storm had not been forecasted. A gust of wind rattled the folding chairs and sent the photo of Elena fluttering down from the coffin onto the grass. Echo immediately turned, darted toward the fallen frame, and stood over it protectively. His eyes lifted again to Knox as if issuing a silent warning. She was good. You're not. Knox broke the silence with an awkward chuckle. Dogs get confused after trauma. He's grieving. Let's not read too much into it. But no one nodded. No one laughed. They just stared. At the dog, and at the man he wouldn't stop growling at. Echo lay down beside the photograph, paws crossed over it, his eyes unblinking. And still, he growled. That night, back in the K-9 facility kennel, Echo refused to enter his enclosure. He stood by the fence instead, watching the road that led into the hills, his tail still, his body tense, his breath shallow. Handlers tried coaxing him. He didn't budge. He just waited. Like something, or someone, was coming, and in the dark shadows behind the trees a figure watched quietly, hidden, not weeping, not speaking, just watching. The last person anyone had expected, and she wasn't dead. Not yet. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds, but it brought no warmth. The town was small enough that rumors traveled faster than traffic, and by noon, whispers, had already threaded through the coffee shops, the grocery lines, the pews of the local church. "Did you see the dog at the funeral? I heard he growled at Captain Knox, wouldn't stop." Dogs sense things, don't they? Evil, guilt, and nobody dared speak it aloud, not yet. But the silence had cracked, and once a silence breaks in a town like Alder Ridge, it never truly returns. At the sheriff's office, Captain Knox paced inside his office, staring through the blinds at the distant edge of the training fields. Echo stood out there, still, like a statue, eyes trained on nothing and everything, waiting. "He's refusing food again," one of the deputies said, entering hesitantly. "He didn't sleep last night, just watched." Knox turned. His uniform was sharp, every button polished, but his collar sat uneven and a sheen of sweat clung to his forehead. "He's a war dog," Knox said gruffly. "Seen more bodies than you and I ever will. Probably just losing it. Dogs don't grieve the same way." The deputy didn't respond. He knew Echo. Everyone in the department did. He wasn't just another working dog. He was Elena's partner, her shadow, her protector, and now it seemed her only defender. "Sir," the deputy added carefully, "we've got a visitor asking about the case, reporter from out of town. Says she's doing a piece on military justice." Knox's lips pressed into a thin line. "Tell her to file a request. No interviews. The case is closed." The door shut behind the deputy, leaving Knox alone again. He ran a hand down his face, then moved to the file cabinet, unlocking the bottom drawer. Inside, sealed in an envelope marked "Confidential," was the case file on Elena Rios. He stared at it for a moment, then shut the drawer. Out in the kennel yard, Echo's ears twitched. Something was coming. At the diner near Main Street, two veterans sat quietly over coffee. Neither of them spoke at first, just listening. "You served with Elena?" one finally asked. The other nodded. "In Kandahar, she saved 6 of us when we were ambushed. Her dog found the IEDs before we even knew we were being watched." "So what happened?" "Knox happened. That's what." The first man leaned in. "You think he set her up?" The second man sipped his coffee, eyes dark. "I think she knew something. I think she found something she wasn't supposed to. And I think Echo remembers." They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. That evening, Captain Knox walked to the training field alone. Echo stood at attention the moment he approached, posture rigid, but this time he didn't growl. He stared. Knox knelt down, slowly. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" The wind picked up. Dry leaves rattled across the gravel. Knox glanced, toward the woods at the edge of the field, his eyes catching movement. But it was only shadows, or so he told himself. He pulled something from his coat, a small metal tag, Elena's K9 badge. Officially retired after her conviction, quietly discarded after her sentencing. He held it out toward Echo like an offering. Echo sniffed it. Then he took a single step back. Knox's hand trembled. "She was guilty," he said under his breath. "She had a temper. Everyone knew it. The evidence, it lined up. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore." Echo's ears flattened. His muscles rippled beneath his fur, and from the tree line something shifted. A silhouette. Gone as soon as he turned toward it. Knox stood abruptly, heart pounding. "Who's there?" No response. Only the wind answering in its ghostly tongue. He turned back toward Echo, but the dog was already walking away, back toward the far end of the field, toward the woods, his head low, tail stiff, steps certain, tracking something. Someone. Knox watched until Echo disappeared beyond the trees, then reached for his radio, but his hand froze halfway. No, he couldn't report this, not yet. He needed time. Time to think, to cover what still might be covered. But time, like the truth, was running out. Back in the woods, Echo paused near an old broken fence, his nose pressed into the earth, then upward. And there, just for a moment, he let out a single bark, not aggressive calling, and a pair of eyes blinked back at him from behind a collapsed hunting blind. Tired, sunken, yet burning with purpose. Elena Rios did not blink. She held her breath as Echo approached, slowly, carefully, until their noses touched. Then she exhaled. "Good boy," she whispered. "You waited." And from deep within the woods, the wind shifted, because the story everyone thought had ended had only just begun. The first time Mara Bennett laid eyes on Elena Rios, it was through the thick bars of a military prison gate, back when Elena still wore her rank like a weight she couldn't shed. Now, weeks after Elena had vanished during her controversial transfer, Mara saw her again, but only from the shadows. Mara had returned to Alder Ridge reluctantly, summoned by rumors, stirred by the whispers. Her assignment as a civilian investigator was unofficial, off the books, and entirely personal. She had served under Elena once, briefly, an intelligence analyst with too many questions and not enough rank to ask them. But she remembered. She remembered how Elena's reports were often redacted, how her commendations went missing, how her missions came back stained with silence, and she remembered the day Echo leapt between her and a landmine. Elena had whistled once, sharp and low, and the dog had obeyed, saving them both. Mara owed them everything. Now Echo had wandered off into the woods, again, and Captain Knox had said nothing. She stood at the edge of the forest that bordered the canine facility, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. Twilight cast long shadows across the ground as she scanned the tree line, her breath slow, calculated. Then movement, a flash of dark fur, then stillness. She crouched. "Echo?" she whispered. Shape stepped forward, but it wasn't the dog, it was Elena. Gaunt, pale, hair pulled back into a rough bun. Her prison shirt was gone, replaced by a flannel and a stolen jacket. Her eyes were sharp, lucid, untouched by madness but marked by pain. Mara stood, slowly. "You're supposed to be in federal custody. You're supposed to be in D.C. They stared at each other for a moment. Then Mara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "You ran." "They were transferring me to an unlisted facility. No paperwork, no hearing, just gone. People don't come back from places like that." "Elena, you were convicted of conspiracy. 2 years ago you were leading search and rescue missions. What happened?" Echo padded forward between them, nudging Elena's hand. She scratched behind his ear, then looked at Mara. "I uncovered something I wasn't supposed to, buried in the supply chain reports during our last deployment. Civilian, shipments, medical containers, but the manifests didn't match. I flagged it, told Knox." "You reported it to Knox?" "I thought he was still one of the good ones. And then what? I got reassigned, then accused. A week later, a raid turned up forged invoices, encrypted drives under my desk, and evidence that conveniently led straight to me." Mara's jaw clenched. "You think he planted it?" "I know he did." The forest wind howled around them, branches hissing like serpents. Mara looked toward the training facility. Its floodlights glowed in the distance, a reminder of order, of uniforms and guns and people who still called Elena a traitor. "You can't stay out here," Mara said. "You'll be caught." "Then help me prove it," Elena replied. "Help me clear my name." Mara hesitated. Helping Elena would mean going against Knox, her former superior. The department still backed him. The community adored him. And any attempt to expose him without hard evidence would get both of them buried in red tape or worse. But Echo stepped forward again, looking up at her with eyes that didn't blink, as if he was waiting, judging. Mara finally nodded. "What do you need?" Elena opened a small satchel. Inside was a scrap of paper, an inventory sheet, and a photograph. Mara recognized the man in it. Sergeant Felix Rudd, logistics officer. Discharged under psychological stress after testifying during Elena's trial. "He's living off-grid now," Elena said. "He knew about the containers. They shut him up, but not completely. You think he'll talk?" "He's the only one who can." Mara pocketed the paper. "Then let's go find him." Before they could move, a rustle in the woods made Echo freeze. Elena held her breath. Mara reached instinctively toward her sidearm, though it was more reflex than necessity. A figure emerged, just a silhouette barely visible through the trees. But Echo didn't growl. He whimpered. Elena turned white. "Rudd?" she called softly. The shape didn't answer. Then it stumbled forward into the moonlight and collapsed. Blood soaked his shoulder. His hands were torn. He had clearly run miles through brush and rock. "Elena," he gasped. They know I talked." Mara rushed to him. "We need to get him somewhere safe." Eleanor helped lift him. "The old ranger cabin. It's still boarded up, half a mile west. Echo knows the way." The dog turned instantly, ears alert, leading them through the dark. As they moved, Eleanor glanced back, just once. Behind them, the forest was silent, too. Silent? And somewhere far off in the control room of the sheriff's office, Knox stood alone, watching a blank screen flicker. He picked up the radio, hand shaking slightly. "Mobilize Unit 4, he said into the mic. "We've got movement." He didn't say who, he didn't say why, because the truth wasn't ready to come out just yet, but the dog already knew. And Echo would never stop until it did. The ranger cabin looked like time had given up on it. Rusted hinges, half-collapsed porch, dust coating every plank like a forgotten tomb. But for Elena, it was a sanctuary carved from memory, a fallback shelter. Used during forest recon exercises. Echo pushed through the door first, as if he had memorized the route all his life. Felix Rudd lay on a makeshift cot inside, teeth clenched against the pain. Mara worked fast, cleaning the gash on his shoulder. With the last of the iodine she carried in her pack, Eleanor sat beside him, one hand on his chest, the other gripping his wrist. "He needs a hospital," Mara muttered. "He won't make it to one," Eleanor said quietly. "Not without drawing them here." Felix opened his eyes. "They've been watching me since the trial. They never stopped." "What did you tell them?" Elena asked. "I told them the truth." He coughed, blood-flecked. Mara held his head, steadying him. "There was a second manifest," he whispered. "The original, before Knox's version replaced it." Mara leaned in. "Where?" "In the dog tags." "What?" "In your dog tags," Felix rasped, eyes flicking toward Elena. "The ones Echo always carried in his vest. I slipped it in there the day they searched your quarters. They never found it." Eleanor's breath caught. Echo, lying silently near the fireplace, lifted his head, tail thumping softly. Slowly, Eleanor approached him. "Echo," she whispered. "Vest." The dog stood, trotting toward her, sitting patiently as she unclipped the dusty black vest she hadn't touched in nearly 2 years. It still carried the marks of the desert, sand-stained threads, sun-bleached nylon, and a rip near the collar where a bullet had once grazed him. She reached into the small interior pocket. A piece of folded, sweat-stiffened paper emerged. Her hands trembled. She unfolded it. And there it was, a full shipping manifest, time-stamped and digitally stamped, bearing the real inventory list from the mission that ended her career. It listed not just medical supplies, but experimental narcotics, unlicensed pharmaceuticals, and a delivery address traced to a shell company registered in the Caymans, tied directly to a contracting firm favored by Knox. Mara scanned the paper. "This is damning. This proves you were set up." "It also proves he was trafficking through military cover routes," Elena said bitterly. "We brought wounded civilians to those depots, children, and Knox used them to move product." Outside, the wind picked up, a low moan through the pine branches. Felix let out a shuddered breath. "He's still watching. You don't understand. The radio chatter, it changed after your trial. They were waiting for you to disappear." Eleanor swallowed hard. "He doesn't want me dead. He wants me erased." Echo growled suddenly, low, guttural, primal, a crunch of branches outside. Mara moved to the window, slowly peeking through the curtain. 2 figures in unmarked black gear moving through the trees. "No insignia," she said. "Private, mercenaries." He "Send them," Elena muttered. "Get the evidence. We move now." Elena grabbed the manifest, slipped it inside the lining of her jacket. "We need to get Felix to safety." "He can't walk," Mara said. Echo nudged a rope coil at the door. Elena blinked, then remembered. They'd trained for scenarios like this, extraction simulations. She quickly fashioned a drag harness with a bedroll, secured Felix's body, and strapped it to Echo's vest frame. "Think he can handle the weight?" "He'll die trying," Eleanor whispered. Outside, night had fallen completely. They slipped out the back, hearts pounding, trees towering above like sentinels. Echo moved with silent discipline, guiding them west toward the old fire road. Mara walked behind Elena, scanning every shadow with her sidearm ready. "Where do we take this?" she asked. "To someone who isn't on Knox's payroll," Elena said. "Judge Carla Ingram. She owed my mother. She's clean. She'll issue a protective order and move the evidence up the chain." "If we make it," a branch snapped nearby. Then a whistle, not from Elena, a signal. The mercenaries had found their trail. Echo barked once, sharp, urgent, then veered left, dragging Felix off the path toward a gully. Elena followed, pulling Mara down just as bullets tore through the underbrush behind them. They didn't stop running. For nearly an hour, they crept through the woods, breath ragged, pulse thrumming in their ears. Echo never faltered, not once. Even with the dead weight behind him, he pushed forward, every muscle tense with purpose. Finally, they emerged into a clearing, and there it was, the ranger station outpost, abandoned but intact, a satellite phone. Lay buried in a rusted cabinet inside. A backup system Elena had hidden years ago. Mara yanked it out. Dialed. "Judge Ingram's chambers," a voice answered. "This is Mara Bennett. Emergency Contact Protocol 11 Bravo. Elena Rios is with me. We have proof of judicial corruption and evidence of federal trafficking by Colonel Martin Knox. We need immediate witness protection." The silence on the other end lasted only a second. Then, "Send coordinates. Help is en route." Elena collapsed onto a bench, blood on her hands, not hers, but still warm. Mara looked at her. "You okay?" "I've been waiting for this moment for 2 years," and as she said it, Echo padded over, collapsing at her feet. He looked up at her, not with exhaustion but peace, the quiet kind of certainty only a dog could understand. "You kept me alive," she whispered, stroking his fur. "You knew I wasn't the traitor." Echo closed his eyes, tail brushing. The floor once. He knew. He always had. Outside, far off in the forest, a distant explosion lit the trees red for a moment. The mercenaries had tripped a booby trap Elena planted days earlier. They weren't coming any closer. The truth was no, longer buried, and soon the world would know. Morning came not with peace but with purpose. The sun broke over the tree line like a searchlight, spilling gold over the courthouse steps. People gathered in silence, journalists, civilians, off-duty officers, even strangers, who had followed the whispers. Whispers that Elena Rios, the convicted traitor, was about to return with something that could unravel the entire chain of command. Judge Carla Ingram had called for an emergency public hearing. A rare move, done only when danger threatened transparency. The courtroom filled before 9 a.m., tension coiling through every bench like a wire stretched to snapping. Colonel Martin Knox sat at the front with 2 lawyers and a quiet smirk on his face. He wore a blue uniform, pressed to perfection, and so ribbon racked so long it looked theatrical. His eyes scanned the gallery once and then paused. There in the back row, Elena Rios, standing, alive, not broken, not hiding, and beside her Echo, sitting still as stone, his gaze fixed directly on Knox. People turned. Gasps broke out. A reporter dropped her pen. The murmur built like a wave. The disgraced veteran who vanished into the mountains had returned. With Vaich, her war dog, with something more powerful than vengeance, truth, Judge Ingram entered, banged her gavel. "Order. This hearing is now in session under protective judicial oversight. Lieutenant Elena Rios, you may proceed." Elena stepped forward, heart pounding. She felt Echo at her side, calm as ever. Her fingers brushed his fur, drawing courage from that one loyal constant. "My name is Elena Rios," she began. "I was court-martialed for theft, insubordination, and destruction of military property following Operation Mothlight." She paused. "I was innocent." Knox's lawyer rose. "Objection, Your Honor. She is a convicted felon." "Overruled," Ingram snapped. "Let her speak." Elena reached into her jacket. "I present the original supply manifest from Operation Mothlight. This document was hidden because it names a foreign shell corporation receiving stolen medical cargo through a military route authorized by Colonel Knox. This copy is dated and matches encrypted transmission logs intercepted by my superior, Officer Felix Rudd, who was declared missing until last week. Gasps Knox stood now. This is absurd. A forged document from a fugitive. Felix Rudd is alive, Ingram interrupted. He provided a sworn audio statement under witness protection. We verified his voice print this morning. Knox's eyes twitched. You don't know what you're messing with, he muttered. Oh, Elena said, stepping closer. But Echo does. She looked down at her canine partner. Go on. And in the silence of that room, the dog walked forward, straight to Knox. People watched, frozen. Echo stopped at the colonel's feet. Then he growled, low, deep, menacing, the same. Growl he'd given the day they'd buried Rudd alive and branded Elena a traitor. Knox shifted. Echo snapped, a short, sharp bark that made two guards reach for their holsters. Control your animal, Knox shouted, backing away. Elena didn't. Move funny, she said. He only reacts that way when someone smells like gunpowder and lies. The judge turned. Colonel Knox, will you submit to a forensic audit of your private holdings and the shell companies listed on this manifest? Knox straightened. This is a kangaroo court. I'll have your badge for this. But just then a voice came from the entrance. You won't. All heads turned. It was the U.S. Marshal. Behind him, a woman in a wheelchair rolled in, bruised, hollow-eyed Mara, and next to her, limping, pale but very much alive, Felix Rudd. Every camera in the room turned. Elena stepped aside. They made it! Mara wheeled forward, her voice hoarse but resolute. I was a medic. I saw the fake logs. I saw the children who died because supplies never arrived. This dog led us to what Knox buried. Felix raised a trembling hand. I was shot and left to rot because I tried to speak out. Knox's face went slack. It was over, he knew it. He turned to bolt, but Echo launched forward when not to attack but to block the door. The dog stood in front of Knox, growling, tail stiff. A marshal stepped in and cuffed the colonel. You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to defraud the United States government, and attempted murder. The room erupted. Some stood. Others cried. A few clapped, but most just stared, in disbelief, not at Knox, at Elena, at Echo. The traitor had returned not for revenge, but for justice, and the one who never doubted her stood there, chest rising and falling, like he had waited his whole life for this. Later, after the crowd dispersed, Eleanor sat on the courthouse steps, the sun now high above, warm on her skin. Echo lay beside her, head on her knee. You knew, didn't you? She said softly. You knew what they did. Echo's tail thumped once Mara approached with coffee. The judge wants you to testify at the Senate hearing. I will. You gonna stick around? I don't know, Elena said. But I think I might train dogs again, teach them how to find what people bury. Good idea, Mara said. You've got one hell of a teacher. They both looked down at Echo. He lifted his head, eyes bright. Elena smiled through tears. He was never just a dog, she whispered. He was the only one who saw me. The courthouse had returned to quiet. No more cameras, no more crowd. But something still hung in the air, like unfinished breath, a storm that had passed but left the trees still trembling. Elena stood outside the courtroom with Echo, one hand resting on his back. The wind was soft now, no longer cold, just present. She stared at the sky, cloudless at last, as if even nature had stopped holding its breath. Inside, Judge Ingram's final ruling had just been sealed. Colonel Knox was being transferred to federal custody, his fortune frozen, his record stripped of every false medal. News was spreading, not just of his downfall, but of the war dog who had unburied the truth. People weren't just whispering about guilt anymore. They were talking about loyalty and justice and love. Echo leaned into her leg, and Elena sank to the steps beside him. The hearing was over, but she wasn't done. Not yet. Later that afternoon, in a government storage facility on the outskirts of town, Eleanor stepped into a cold, dimly lit room filled with evidence boxes, most of them sealed for years. Locked behind red tape and silence, she was granted access to 1. Box 47L. Inside, a dusty military duffel, a cracked photo frame, and a USB drive hidden inside a hollowed-out training dummy. She plugged the drive into the marshal's laptop, and the screen flickered to life. Dozens of voice memos, encrypted documents, and one final video file. Rudd's video log. She clicked. The image loaded, grainy, flickering. Felix Rudd appeared on screen, pale and sweat-drenched, speaking into his vest cam from what looked like a cave. A wound on his shoulder bled slowly. "If you're seeing this," he began, "it means Elena survived." He winced, shifted. "I'm recording this because I've seen things no one should see. Knox rerouted critical medical aid during Operation Mothlight, used black market supply trails and pinned it on Elena after she caught wind." I tried to stop. "Him?" Rudd looked straight at the camera. "Elena's the most honest soldier I've ever known. And Echo, that dog, he doesn't bark unless the devil walks in. I trust them both with my life." The screen cut to static, then silence. Elena leaned back, closing her eyes. There it was. The last missing piece. The final record of a man who'd risked everything to confirm the truth. She turned to the marshal. "This needs to go to the Senate." Inquiry. He nodded. "We'll deliver it, but what about you?" She looked down at Echo. "I think we need to go home." 3 days later, Elena stood at the edge of an open field in Colorado, not far from where her family's farm used to be. Most of it had burned down during her trial. Some say vandals torched it, others say it was just coincidence. But one thing had survived. The barn. And inside it, crates of Echo's old gear, photographs nailed to the wall, and a wooden training post still standing like a forgotten monument. Elena opened the gate and let Echo run. The German shepherd bounded across the grass, free for the first time in what felt like lifetimes. He sniffed the wind, rolled in dirt, chased a butterfly, then he stopped suddenly, alert. He looked toward the tree line. Elena followed his gaze. Out stepped a teenage boy, quiet, hesitant. Behind him, his mother, a woman from town. She held something in her hands. A leash. A small brown dog cowered at her feet, half-starved, one ear torn, clearly abused. The woman called out, "They said you trained dogs that no one else could reach." Elena looked at Echo. He trotted forward, gently, slowly, toward the broken pup. He lay down in front of it, tail wagging, not a bark or growl. The little dog crept forward and touched noses. The boy smiled. Elena swallowed hard. "Bring him here," she said. "We'll start today." Weeks passed. The barn became a sanctuary, not just for dogs, but for people, veterans, kids, survivors. Elena taught them how to work with animals, but more than that, how to listen, how to see the truth. Beneath the surface, Echo became the heart of the place, not just a dog, a legend. One day, a letter arrived. Official-looking envelope, U.S. Senate seal. Elena opened it with steady hands. An official apology, signed by 3 senators, with a separate medal enclosed, not for her, but for Echo, awarded for bravery, loyalty, and service in pursuit of justice beyond the call of duty. She looked down at him. He sat there, panting softly as if none of it mattered, but it did because it meant the world believed them now. Months later, a small ceremony was held at the courthouse lawn. Eleanor didn't want a crowd, but people came. Anyway, they brought flowers, candles, little notes that said thank you. Echo wore his vest again, only this time not for war. For peace. As the national anthem played, the dog sat perfectly still, watching, listening, protecting, just like always. And as the flag reached the top of the pole, a breeze rolled through. Light, gentle, familiar. Elena whispered, "You never let me fall, did you?" Echo nudged her hand. She smiled. That night, as the sun dropped over the mountain ridge and the sky turned to ash and gold, Eleanor sat on the porch of the rebuilt house. Echo lay beside her, his head resting on her foot. She read a worn letter. One Rudd had written before the mission that changed everything. "If anything happens, don't give up. You and that dog see things others can't. Sometimes it's not the war that breaks you. It's the silence that follows. But you, Elena, you'll speak. And he'll listen. That's enough." She folded the letter, looked at the stars and said quietly, "We're not broken anymore. We're just honest." Echo lifted his head and let out one single bark, sharp, clear, like punctuation, and the wind carried it through the valley, across the dark, over every hill and hollow, not as a warning but as a vow, because the world had called her a criminal. But her dog never believed it. And now, neither did anyone else.